Okay, welcome. Welcome everyone to session number 269 of Kevin Reed's A Course in Miracles. All right, today we are in the Manual for Teachers, and we are focusing on question number 20. What is the peace of God? Okay, let's just begin. Paragraph 1. It has been said that there is a kind of peace that is not of this world. How is it recognized? How is it found? And being found, how can it be retained? Let us consider each of these questions separately, for each reflects a different step along the way. Okay. Each reflects a different step along the way to experiencing the ultimate peace of God. All right. He says, it's been said that there's a kind of peace that is not of this world. All right. And Christian scriptures, there's St. Paul who talks about the peace that passeth all understanding. The peace that passes all understanding. Okay? And Jesus is purported to have said to his disciples in the Gospel of John, I leave you my peace. All right. Peace I give you. I leave you my peace. All right. Which meant the peace that I experience. All right. I leave it to you. All right. It's there for you. And he's talking about the peace that just goes beyond anything experienced in this world of form. Okay, so he says it has been said there's a kind of peace that is not of this world. Okay, paragraph 2. First, how can the peace of God be recognized? God's peace is recognized at first by just one thing. In every way, it is totally unlike all previous experiences. It calls to mind nothing that went before. It brings with it no past associations. It is a new thing entirely. There is contrast, yes, between the thing and all the past, between this thing and all the past. But strangely, it is not a contrast of true differences. The past just slips away, and in its place is everlasting quiet. Only that. The contrast first perceived has merely gone. Quiet has reached to cover everything. So, how do we recognize the peace of God? He says, like nothing else you ever experienced in your life. And there's nothing really to contrast it with, because he says the contrast will fade because it's illusory, right? Which is everything in this worldly experience, a form. Okay? In every way, it is totally unlike all previous experiences. Right? It is a new thing entirely. So he says, there is a contrast, yes, but this thing, the peace, right, and between this thing and all the past, right, but he says that's momentary, because that all just fades away, because the only thing is the eternal quiet, the eternal peace, because the past just slips away. and in its place is everlasting quiet. Only that. The contrast first perceived has merely gone. Quiet has reached to cover everything. All right, so that's how the peace of God is recognized. It's like nothing else you've ever experienced in this world. Okay. So then he says, well, how can it be found? How can I find it? How is this quiet found? No one can fail to find it who but seeks out its conditions. God's peace can never come where anger is, for anger must deny that peace exists. Who sees anger as justified in any way or any circumstance proclaims that peace is meaningless and must believe that it cannot exist. In this condition, peace cannot be found. Therefore, forgiveness is the necessary condition for finding the peace of God. More than this, given forgiveness, there must be peace. For what except attack will lead to war? And what but peace is opposite to war? Here, the initial contrast stands out clear and apparent. Yet when peace is found, the war is meaningless. And it is conflict now that is perceived as non-existent and unreal. Okay. So it echoes some of the things in the text, of course, where Jesus says, once the journey is begun, the end is certain. All right? Once you have that desire to know the truth, right? To experience peace, to see correctly, right? Once you're on the path, he goes, the end is certain. All right? So that's what he means. No one can fail to find it. No one can fail to find the peace. No one can fail to find it who but seeks out its conditions. Okay? And then he tells us, what's the conditions? Well, God, the peace can never come where anger is. Right? Because anger denies that peace exists. Right? And who sees anger as justified in any way or any circumstance proclaims that peace is meaningless. So my ego will tell me, my ego is going to say, yeah, but look what he did. Look what she said. Look what they're doing to me. Right? And I have these resentments, big or small. It's all the same, because it's a veil drawn over the existence of peace. So peace can never come where anger is. And who sees anger as justified proclaims that peace is meaningless. Yeah, but look what she did. Look what he did. You might as well just scream, peace is meaningless. There can be no peace. Look what they did. And in this condition, peace cannot be found. All right. So he says, so what are you going to do? He says, so therefore, forgiveness is the necessary condition for finding the peace of God. Help me to see correctly. I am willing. I truly want to see the truth about the situation, about the person, whatever it is, right? The condition. I'm willing to see the truth, right? help me to see correctly. I'm asking my internal teacher, my eternal teacher, Jesus, Holy Spirit. That's why it's so, for students of the course, it's so necessary to establish a relationship with Jesus. All right? Like he's your friend. All right? Talk to him like he's your friend. He doesn't mind, salty language every now and then. You tell me, what the hell's going on here? Help me. All right? Cut a brother a break. All right? So forgiveness is the necessary condition for finding the peace of God. I'm willing to see differently. I'm willing to have my perception corrected. My perception is, look what she said, look what she did, look what he did, look what they're doing. I am the victim, and my anger is justified. He says, well, you could continue to think that way, but realize the repercussions. You're not going to be peaceful because you're denying that peace exists or that it's even possible. The only way it's possible is to have my interpretation of the situation corrected, my perception. I'm willing, and so I'm willing. I want the peace. I don't want to fight. Right? I don't want to argue. I don't want to have to remember why I hate you every time I see you. I don't want to do that. I just want to be peaceful. Right? And the ego will always tug at you and say, yeah, but look what you're losing. You're losing your self-esteem, and they're just making fun of you and taking advantage of you, and they're blaming you for stuff you shouldn't be blamed for, or they're holding grudges, for stuff you did 20 years ago. Whatever. The ego is going to tell you why your anger is justified. Right? But the ego wants to continue on the path of individuality. I am an individual. You can't do this to me. I am an individual. We have separate interests. We're separate. Right? That's why forgiveness is the key. Forgiveness is the key to peace. All right? And, oh, by the way, the ego is afraid of peace. Because in the presence of the peace of God, the ego dissolves. There is no individuality. In the presence of the true peace, the peace that passes understanding, the peace that Jesus gives us. Right? And again, oh, by the way, it's always there. It's always in your mind. Right? It's just that these resentments, the angers, no matter how justified we think it is, right? Just even a little resentment, a little twinge of annoyance drops the veil. It blocks us from realizing the peace that always exists in our mind. It's just waiting for us to remove the blocks, as they say in the introduction to the Course, to remove the blocks to the awareness to love's presence. And peace is the presence of love. So what forgiveness helps us to do, it's the tool. It helps us to correct our perceptions, right, so that we can remove the blocks to the awareness of the peace of God. It's always with us. We just don't believe it. And besides, we're afraid of it. We think that if I encounter the peace of God, God's going to destroy me. That's drummed into us through years and centuries of tradition and teaching. You know, my God is an angry God. Well, we'll put off meeting him. I want to meet that God that says, I love you so much. You live in me. Right? But it's drummed into us that you did something wrong. And now you got to get punished for it. All right? And we go around living our life. It wasn't me, it was her. It wasn't me, it was him. Because the ego says, just project the guilt, you'll feel better. Don't worry about it. But that doesn't work. All right? And so forgiveness is the condition. Forgiveness is the necessary condition for finding the peace of God. He goes, and more than this, given for forgiveness, there must be peace. And by practicing forgiveness, by being willing to see correctly, you get that peace, you know, in our experience, it arises more and more. And we want it more and more when we experience a little peace. Right? Even if it's just in this one condition or with this one person, all of a sudden there's the conflict is done because my desire, I wanted to see the truth. Right? So we keep practicing more and more. And little by little, those veils are parted. The blocks are removed. And in one moment, there's that, oh, so this is what she means, as Paul Simon would say. Now I'm forcing myself to quote Paul Simon in a song. He goes, there's a girl in New York City who calls herself the human trampoline. And sometimes when I'm falling, tumbling in turmoil, I say, oh, so this is what she means. All right? So when we feel the peace, even a little bit, it's like, oh, so this is what he means. This is what Jesus is talking about. All right? And we want it more. And that will behoove us to practice more and more. Help me to say. And notice that when I'm holding on to a gripe or a grievance, a resentment, a anger, a fear, I'm not peaceful. So what is it I want? If I want peace, it's like, okay, I have to, what Jesus would say, I have to say not no. Because the ego is the big no. No, I'm not part of the oneness. So Jesus, in his penchant for double negatives, he says you have to learn to say not no. So that's it. I don't want the conflict. I want peace. And then I go to my friend. I said, could you help me? Steer me on the right path. Show me what peace looks like. And so forgiveness is the condition. And he goes, and more than that, he goes, given forgiveness, there must be peace. For what except attack will lead to war? Right? It's only when I'm projecting guilt, that's the attack. That leads to war. And what but peace is the opposite to war? Here, the initial contrast stands out clear and apparent. Yet when peace is found, the war is meaningless. And it is conflict now that is perceived as non-existent and unreal. And we will experience that more and more. I think in my life it's, incrementally. Right? I think that's the human condition. We approach peace. I always look at it like little kids at the beach, at the ocean. When they walk up, when the wave has moved out, they walk up into the water. Then when the wave comes back in and the water is rushing toward the shore, they start running away. And that's, to me, what the process of going into the peace is. You approach the peace, but then when it comes toward you, it's like you run like the little kids running away from the wave in the ocean. But that's it. But little by little, you learn, to stand in the undulation of the water, the peaceful undulation of the ocean, when it's peaceful. All right. And it is the conflict now that is perceived as non-existent and unreal. All right. So that's how to find peace, through forgiveness. Okay. So paragraph 4 says, so once you found it, how do you keep it? Paragraph 4, how is the peace of God retained once it is found? Returning anger in whatever form will drop the heavy curtain once again. And the belief that peace cannot exist will certainly return. War is again accepted as the one reality. Now must you once again lay down your sword. Although you do not recognize, you have picked it up again. But you will learn, as you remember even faintly now, what happens was yours with... Let me read that again. But you will learn, as you remember even faintly now, what happens was yours without it, that you must have taken it as your defense. Stop now for a moment and think of this. Is conflict what you want, or is God's peace the better choice? Which gives you more? A tranquil mind is not a little gift. Would you not rather live than choose to die? All right. And I was just having a conversation with a friend, and relating a recent incident within the last year or so, where I had an argument with a neighbor. And I thought I was doing the right thing, and, long story short, I picked up the sword, and I brandished it, It says war again is accepted as the one reality. In that moment, the war was the only reality that I could see. He says, so now what has to happen? He goes, now must you once again lay down your sword. All right? There's that choice point. Do I want this? Do I really want this? All right? He goes, just put the sword down. Right? Although you do not recognize you have picked it up again. He says, but you will learn as you remember even faintly now. He goes, you'll remember what was yours without the sword. All right? Even if it's just a faint memory. Because you're practicing forgiveness, you'll remember, oh, forgiveness is possible. All right? But you will learn as you remember even faintly now. What happens was yours without it. All right? That you must have taken it again as your defense. All right? And then he says, stop for a moment. Ask yourself, what do I want? Do I want God's peace, or do I want the war? Is conflict what you want, or is God's peace a better choice? All right. Which gives you more? These are all the things that quickly go on in our mind. All right? There's a benefit to the peace. Just trust in that. All right? I think right in the beginning of this manual for teachers, he talks extensively on the development of trust. Trust the process. Trust the process. A tranquil mind is not a little gift. A tranquil mind gives us different perception. So it's not a little gift. It's no longer the perception of the ego. All right. He says, would you rather live than choose to die? All right. And death is always equated with the belief in separation. All right. Would you rather live, which is joining with Jesus in the right mind and on the journey to remembering your eternal life? Or do you choose to die, which is aligning yourself with the thought of separation in the ego? Paragraph 5. Living is joy. All right? That connection to the oneness, that realization of innocence is joy. He goes, but death can only weep. All right? The choice to believe I'm separate and guilty, there's only weeping. Right? Mourning and weeping in this valley of tears, as the prayer goes. All right. That's the ego thought system. That's life. Life in quotes in the world of form. It's a series of tear-inducing events. Weeping and sadness. Intermittently, you get a day off and you have a few laughs. But that's not the peace of God. The peace of God, everything is gone except the eternal joy. All right. So, would you rather live than choose to die? Paragraph 5, living is joy, but death can only weep. You see in death escape from what you made, but this you do not see, that you made death. And it is but illusion of an end. Death cannot be escape, because it is not life in which the problem lies. Life has no opposite, for it is God. Life and death seem to be opposites, because you have decided death ends life. Forgive the world now, and you will understand that everything that God created cannot have an end. And nothing he did not create is real. In this one sentence is our course explained. In this one sentence is our practicing given its one direction. And in this one sentence is the Holy Spirit's whole curriculum, specified exactly as it is. Right? And this harkens back to the quote in the introduction to the Course, where he says, nothing real can be threatened. Nothing unreal exists. Herein lies the peace of God. And he's just saying it in different words now. Forgive the world, and you will understand that everything that God created cannot have an end. and understand that everything that he did not create, and nothing he did not create is real. Right? If everything he did not create, which is this entire universe, right, is not real. Nothing real can be threatened. Nothing unreal exists. Herein lies the peace of God. It's from the introduction to the text, and Jesus says the course can therefore be summed up very simply in this way: nothing real can be threatened. You, as you are, your true self, cannot be threatened. And he says, actually, nothing unreal exists. Right? It's all an illusion. And once we get it, once we understand that, once we experience that, herein lies the peace of God. So what we're doing is removing the blocks to the awareness of love, the peace of God. Forgive the world, and you will understand that everything that God created cannot have an end. And nothing he did not create is real. In this one sentence, our course is explained. He says that in the introduction, too. And this one sentence is our practice given its one direction. Right? So our practice, the direction of our practice, is to discern what is real and what is not, what is meaningful and what is meaningless. Right? And we do that by asking, help me to see. Right? I don't want to fight anymore. I'm tired of it. Right? He says, lay down the sword, man. I had a very good friend, an older Irish guy, Bob Mulvey, and he's a brilliant man. He had 3 different PhDs, wonderful sense of humor. All right, and I would talk to him about things, and he goes, "Don't worry, Kevin. It's okay if you show them the sword. You don't have to use it, but you can show them every now and then." But here Jesus is saying, put the sword down. Just put it down, right? And ask me, how can I see things? How can I see it? And if I need to do something, I'll be directed. It'll come up. It'll be a very clear and, as I say, a loud idea. All right? So in the beginning of paragraph 5, he says, death can only weep. So that decision to believe I'm separate, all it can do is be very sad. And he goes, and you see death in this, as in our physical form. He says, you see death as an escape. Like you hear it, you say, oh, they're not in pain anymore. They're this and that. And there's a tendency to think that death is an escape. All right? And, some people make the ultimate mistake, and they do that. But, they didn't do anything wrong, they just made a mistake. All right? And the repercussions are felt mainly among the living, as if we're living. All right? But it's just a misperception. All right? We think that death is an escape. from what you made, which is this world. He says, but this you do not see, that you made death. All right? And even death, he says, but it's just an illusion of an end. All right? And it's always been my contention that people who take their own lives, mistake, but the spirit goes on, and the spirit will eventually find the peace of God. All right? Although this seems so monumental and sad to us living in this form, it does. It wreaks havoc on families and things. But that spirit will go on and have other experiences in which it can learn that it is not separate from the oneness. There's no need to be afraid. Right? There's no need for the illusion of victimhood or hopelessness or anything like that. All right? That's just an aside that for some reason it's coming up. But the spirit continues, and it will eventually find the oneness. It will. It's inevitable. Because it's already in the oneness. It just chose not to believe that. Okay. So death cannot be an escape because it is not life in which the problem lies. All right? So life is not the problem because it's a magic thought. All right? It's a coping mechanism. Because I believe I separated from the oneness. Now I had to make this life to prove it. He says, but that's not where the problem is. The problem is in the belief that I separated from the oneness. He says, life has no opposite, for it is God. All right? So it's not in this make-believe life where the problem is. It's not in this everyday world, everyday life. All right? The problem is in my mind that I thought I separated from God. I believe it. And everything that happens to me is the manifestation of that. Trying to reinforce the idea. That's why I have to choose. I have to take that moment and say, wait, I want to see the truth. Which implies totally I want to see the oneness. I want to be accepted in the oneness. I don't want to see the conflict anymore. All right? That's what he means by life has no opposite. So life, the oneness, the life in God has no opposite. He says, in sentence 6, life and death seem to be opposites because you have decided that death ends life. And then he lays it out. He goes, forgive the world, and you will understand that everything that God created cannot have an end. So as I keep asking, help me to see correctly, more and more it will dawn on me, it will arise in my consciousness, my awareness, that everything God created cannot have an end. All right? Everything will start reflecting that. And nothing he did not create is real. And in this one sentence is our course explained. In this one sentence is our practicing given its direction. And in this one sentence is the Holy Spirit's whole curriculum specified exactly as it is. Paragraph 6. What is the peace of God? No more than this: the simple understanding that His will is wholly without opposite. There is no thought that contradicts His will, yet can be true. The contrast between His will and yours but seemed to be reality. In truth, there was no conflict, for His will is yours. Now is the mighty will of God Himself, His gift to you. He does not seek to keep it for Himself. Why would you seek to keep your tiny, frail imaginings apart from Him? The will of God is one and all there is. This is your heritage. The universe beyond the sun and stars, and all the thoughts of which you can conceive, belong to you. God's peace is the condition for His will. Attain His peace, and you will remember Him. All right. So what's the peace of God? It's understanding that His will is wholly without opposite. His will is innocence, oneness. Right? That's it. You live in me. You're part of the great expanse of oneness. And there is no thought that contradicts His will and can be true. So when I say, no, I'm separate, I'm an individual, he goes, well, that's a thought, but it can't be true. All right? There is no thought that contradicts the oneness and can be true at the same time. All right? So that's what we're trying to learn. Help me to see the truth. Help me to see the truth about the person, the situation, the condition. I'm willing. I put down my sword. All right. The contrast between His will and yours only seemed to be reality. So this whole experience in form only seems to be reality. In truth, there was no conflict, for His will was yours. In that sentence, He's saying, in truth, you never left. You never left the oneness. You only had a thought that was erased immediately, but we're living in the echoes of that thought. Right? We're living in the echoes. I love that term. There is no conflict, for His will is yours. You're the same. As Jesus told His apostles, I and the Father are one. Right? And so are you. All right. There is no conflict, for His will is yours. Now is the mighty will of God Himself, His gift to you. Now you get it. He does not seek to keep it for Himself. Why would you seek to keep your tiny, frail imaginings apart from Him? All right. So bring everything to the right mind and have it retranslated. All right. The will of God is one and all there is. All right. The idea that there is only the innocence, the eternal oneness. Says that's your heritage. That belongs to you. Right? And then he says, the universe beyond the sun and stars, and all the thoughts of which you can conceive belong to you. So he's not talking about planets, beyond planets. He's talking about everything that's beyond form. Right? Everything that's beyond form. The universe beyond the sun and stars. Right? and beyond all the thoughts that you can conceive. Right? That universe belongs to you. And God's peace is the condition for his will. Right? And he says, attain the peace and you will remember him. Right? In another place he says, we see the face of Christ and we remember God. And remember that forgiveness is the key for attaining peace. So the face of Christ is we see the innocence because we wanted to. I'm willing to see the innocence. I'm willing to see the truth. So we see the face of Christ and we remember God. All right? Attain his peace and you will remember him. All right? And as the story goes, you'll live happily ever after. Okay then. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for helping me study. And I will see you next time. Bye.